I woke up with this quiet flutter in my chest, the kind that feels like both nerves and joy, twisted together. The sunlight poured through the curtains like it had been choreographed just for me. Everything smelled like lavender and promise. My wedding was 2 days away, and for once, everything felt easy. The dress was hanging by the window, the caterers were confirmed, and my heart was bursting with love for the man I was about to marry. Ethan, the one who called me his home. The one I thought was mine. I spent the morning double-checking guest baskets and laughing with my cousins, sipping coffee that had gone cold while I got caught in daydreams. Every corner of the house buzzed with people, familiar voices, suitcases rolling in, my mom whispering about centerpieces. And me? I floated, touched by everyone's joy. I felt like a bride, not just in the romantic way, but in that grounded, deeply happy way. I had chosen Ethan, and he had chosen me. Or at least, I thought he had. When Talia walked in, I could tell something was wrong before she even said a word. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and she held out her phone like it was made of glass. "You need to see this," she whispered. My stomach dropped before I even unlocked the screen. The messages were all there. His name, her replies. The dates, recent. The tone, unmistakable, flirty, intimate. One of them was from this morning. My fingers went cold. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just looked at Talia and said as calmly as I could, "We don't cancel the wedding. We change the ending." Talia stared at me like she expected me to shatter right there. And maybe I should have. But something in me settled instead, like a lake freezing over in an instant. I handed her back the phone and smiled. A small, deliberate smile, the kind you wear when you're deciding to stay 3 steps ahead. "No one else sees this," I told her. "Not yet." She hesitated like she wanted to argue, but then she nodded. That's what best friends do. They trust your silence, even when it's louder than words. I went back into the room with the others and acted like nothing had happened. Someone handed me a glass of Prosecco. I laughed at a joke I barely heard. I held my dress up to the light and told my mom how perfect it looked. Inside, though, my brain was stitching together every lie I must have missed, every late meeting, every glance at his phone. Every moment I had given him the benefit of the doubt, like a fool in love, blinded by good intentions. But now I could see, and I wasn't going to scream. I was going to wait, watch, and choose my moment. That night, while everyone else was sharing stories and toasting to forever, I sat in bed with a pen in my hand. The wedding vows I'd written weeks ago were in the drawer, untouched. Instead, I started a new page. I wrote slowly, deliberately. The beginning was soft, sweet even. The kind of words everyone would expect. But halfway through, my tone shifted. I didn't erase it. I leaned in. Because this wasn't a love story anymore. It was a reveal, a decision, a final scene no one would see coming. I kept the new vows folded inside my journal, next to a pressed flower Ethan once gave me. Funny how something that used to feel tender now felt hollow. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I missed him, but because I was mourning something else. The version of myself that believed him without question, that defended him, that once looked at her future and saw only him. That girl was gone. And the woman left behind? She wasn't bitter. She was awake. And awake women don't collapse. They calculate. The next morning, I greeted the wedding planner with a warm smile. I took photos with my nieces. I posed with Ethan when he wrapped his arm around my waist like nothing had happened. He kissed my cheek and called me his bride, and I let him. Let him look proud, relaxed, unbothered. He still had no idea. I watched him check his phone between conversations. I knew exactly who he was texting, and I didn't flinch. Because when you've been handed the truth, there's a quiet kind of power in deciding how and when you'll use it. Later that evening, my mom pulled me aside. She touched my cheek and said, "Something's different about you, baby." I smiled and kissed her hand. "You'll see," I whispered, and I meant it. Because tomorrow I would walk down the aisle. Everyone would be watching. Everyone would be expecting a love story. But what they'd get was something much more honest. I woke up before the sun, my heart oddly calm. Not excited, not anxious. Just steady. The kind of stillness that comes when you've already made your decision. I looked in the mirror and told myself to smile. And I did. I smiled so well that even I started to believe it. The house was buzzing. Stylists unpacking bags, my aunt steaming dresses, music playing low from someone's phone. I moved through it all like I was floating. "She's glowing," someone whispered. If only they knew what kind of fire was really burning underneath. When I stepped into rehearsal, I played my part like a pro, held Ethan's hand when they told us to, practiced turning and smiling at the crowd. I even laughed when he made some joke to his groomsmen about not tripping over his own feet. He was so relaxed, so completely unaware. He didn't see the way my fingers curled just slightly tighter into my palm each time he glanced down at his phone. Still hiding her, still choosing her. But I didn't say a word. Not yet. Let him enjoy this day. The last one where he thinks he has it all. By mid-afternoon, we were sitting at the long dining table in the garden for the final family dinner before the big day. Champagne was flowing. Toasts were made. I watched his mother dote on him and call me the luckiest girl alive. I smiled back and thanked her. But my mind wasn't at the table. It was with the folded note in my purse, my vows. Not the ones I wrote months ago, the ones I finished just last night. I'd rehearsed every line in my head like a prayer. But tomorrow, I wouldn't need to pretend anymore. Later that night, I found myself sitting alone on the porch while everyone else danced inside. The air was warm, soft with jasmine and distant laughter. I could hear Ethan's voice through the open window, telling some story, probably one he'd told 100 times. I wondered if she'd heard it too. I wondered if he told her he loved her the way he used to tell me. I stared at the stars and felt nothing. No ache, no pull, just a still kind of knowing. This wasn't going to be a wedding. It was going to be a reveal. I kept thinking about the moment it would happen. Would my voice shake? Would he catch on before I said the words? I didn't think so. He was too comfortable, too sure of me. That was always the problem. He thought I'd never leave, that I loved him too much to burn the bridge, and he was half right. I did love him. But I had learned something in the last 48 hours. Love without truth is just a leash. And I wasn't leashed anymore. I wasn't walking into that church to beg. I was walking in to break the spell. My mother came out to check on me. She sat beside me, wrapped her shawl tighter, and looked at me for a long time. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked gently. And I lied. Not because I didn't trust her, but because this had to be mine. My timing, my words, my fire. "I'm just tired," I told her, and leaned my head on her shoulder. She kissed my hair like she did when I was little. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't scared anymore. Just ready. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the occasional clink of glasses downstairs, the fading sounds of celebration. I kept picturing his face, the way he'd smile tomorrow when he saw me in white. How proud he'd look, how sure. And I let the image sit there. I studied it like you study something before you let it go for good. I wasn't nervous anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was focused, clear. Every piece of me knew what had to be done, and how to do it. In the quiet, I pulled out the vow card one last time. The paper felt heavier now, like it was carrying more than just words. It held my truth, my freedom. I whispered the lines to myself in the dark, letting each syllable settle into my bones. I wanted to remember how they felt in my mouth before I released them into the world. I didn't want to sound bitter. That wasn't the point. I wanted to sound awake, like a woman who had seen the fire and chose not to be consumed by it, only illuminated. Just before dawn, I watched the sky begin to shift, a pale blue creeping into the dark like a secret, and I knew this would be the last morning Ethan ever assumed I'd say I do. Everyone else thought they were coming to see a love story, but love was never supposed to look like betrayal in a tuxedo. So I pressed my palms together, took a breath, and stood. Because the next time I'd see him, I'd be walking toward him, and I'd be carrying the truth in my hands like a gift he never saw coming. I don't remember much about getting ready. It's like my body went on autopilot while my mind drifted far above everything. People fluttered around me, stylists, bridesmaids, my mother wiping tears of joy. Cameras flashed, laughter echoed. I sat there, letting them curl my hair, button my dress, paint on the look of a woman about to live her dream. And in a way, I was. Just not the dream they thought. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I looked stunning, strong. Like a woman stepping into her power, not her husband's life. The music started. The guests stood. My father offered his arm and whispered, "You ready, baby?" And I nodded, not because I was walking toward Ethan, but because I was walking toward the truth. Each step down that aisle felt like a countdown, not to a beginning, but to a release. I could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes, all smiling, all hopeful. I smiled back. Because no one knew what was coming. Not even Ethan, who stood at the altar looking at me like I was his entire world. It almost made me pity him. Almost. When I reached the altar, he took my hands, warm, steady, still believing in the story he'd built. The officiant welcomed everyone, made a few light jokes. People laughed. Ethan squeezed my hand. The moment was picture perfect, but picture perfect is fragile. And today, it was going to crack wide open. The officiant turned to me and said, "Camille, your vows?" I took a breath. Time slowed. I looked Ethan right in the eyes. He smiled. I didn't. And then I said it. One word. Clear. Unshaken. No. At first, there was silence, pure, suspended silence. I could hear someone gasp behind me. A murmur rippled through the rows like a slow-moving wave, crashing into disbelief. Ethan blinked, unsure if he'd heard me right. He gave this awkward laugh, waiting for the punchline. But there wasn't one. I didn't flinch. I didn't waver. I just looked at him, really looked at him for who he was. And then I turned to the guests, my voice calm, my spine tall. I found out 2 days ago that Ethan has been unfaithful. You could feel the shift in the air, sharp and immediate. Eyes widened. Hands flew to mouths. A woman in the second row whispered, "Oh my God." But I wasn't done. "I didn't come here to embarrass anyone," I said. "I came here because I thought you all deserved the truth. I won't pretend in front of my family, my friends, or God. I won't bless a lie just to protect someone else's image." I looked at his mother, her hand frozen in mid-clap, and then at my own mother, who simply nodded once, with tears in her eyes. Ethan started to speak, his face red, confused, sputtering with half-formed excuses. But I didn't let him steal the moment. Not this one. I turned back to the aisle, adjusted the hem of my dress, and walked. Not rushed, not in shame, but in dignity. Every step echoed louder than the vows I never spoke. People parted as I passed. Some cried, Some followed me with their eyes like I was a fire moving through a field. And in that moment, I wasn't the bride. I was the woman who chose herself, in front of everyone. As I reached the doors, I heard someone say my name. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. Let them sit with their shock. Let them sit with him. My heels clicked against the marble floor like a heartbeat, steady, unfaltering. And with every step, I felt something peeling off of me. The guilt, the shame, the pressure to forgive quietly. It all slid to the floor behind me like the train of a dress I never meant to wear. I pushed open the doors and stepped outside, where the air was crisp and real and mine. I didn't cry. Not then. Not later. My hands were steady as I took out my phone and texted Talia one word. Done. I could almost feel her exhale from wherever she was sitting. She had offered to stand beside me today, ready to help if I needed her. But I told her this had to be mine. All mine. And it was. Not just the moment, but the silence that followed. The kind of silence that fills you up, not empties you out. I looked up at the sky and smiled. I hadn't ruined a wedding. I had saved a life, my own. And as I stood on those steps, dress still clinging to my body, heart still pounding in my chest, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't broken. I wasn't humiliated. I was free. I hadn't said I do to a man who betrayed me. I had said no. To lies, to silence, to shrinking myself for someone else's comfort. And while everyone behind those doors tried to make sense of what had just happened, I took my first real breath. The kind that tells you, something new is finally beginning. By the time I got home, my phone was already buzzing like it had caught fire. Text after text, missed calls, voicemails I had no intention of opening. My cousin sent me a video. Someone had recorded it. My moment. That single word. That truth, spoken at the altar. I watched it, not because I needed to relive it, but because I wanted to see myself from the outside. And there she was, calm, centered, defiant in satin and lace. I barely recognized her. And yet, I knew she'd been waiting to show up for years. Support came pouring in like a flood. Old friends, acquaintances, women I barely knew who found the clip online. "You're a hero," some wrote. "You saved me without knowing it." One woman said, "You walked out so I could find the courage to do the same." I didn't expect that. I didn't do it for them. I did it for me. But somehow, my truth had echoed. It had hit something raw and universal. And that mattered more than any wedding ever could. I wasn't just a woman who said no. I was now a symbol of one who meant it. And Ethan? Of course he called. Over. And over. The messages started with confusion, shifted into apologies, then full-blown desperation. "It didn't mean anything," he said in one. "We were stressed. I made a mistake." But it wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. A decision, made over and over, in private, thinking I'd never know. Thinking he'd never have to pay for it. What he didn't realize was, I did find out. And I didn't throw a tantrum. I didn't burn his clothes or scream in public. I just walked away, while everyone was watching. The next morning, I woke up to over 3,000 notifications. My name was trending. Someone had uploaded the video with the title, "She Said No and Meant It." 3 million views, comments pouring in from all over the world, women, men, even therapists weighing in. Bravery in its rawest form. A masterclass in self-respect. I sat on my couch, hair still tangled, coffee untouched, just staring. I never asked for this kind of spotlight. But I wasn't afraid of it either. I had spoken the truth, and now it was speaking back. Later that day, the woman, posted a photo. Her, in bed, Ethan's shirt unmistakably draped over her shoulder. The caption? No more secrets. And honestly, I felt nothing. No sting, no rage, just confirmation. Confirmation that I had been right to trust my gut. Right to listen to the quiet voice inside me that had screamed when I saw those screenshots. She thought she was exposing something. But all she did was underline everything I'd already walked away from. I didn't need revenge. I had peace. People kept asking if I regretted how I did it. Why not just cancel the wedding quietly? Why not handle it behind closed doors? But that's the thing. The betrayal wasn't quiet. It was loud in my body. Loud in my mind. It robbed me of sleep, of safety, of certainty. So why should the truth be whispered? Why should his shame be protected when my trust wasn't? I didn't need to shame him. I just needed to stop protecting the version of him that never existed. And that was the real freedom. The funny thing is, people kept calling me brave, like I'd jumped into fire. But I didn't feel brave. I felt honest. Like I'd finally said what I should have said long ago, just louder. I wasn't trying to start a movement or go viral. I was trying to protect my future. And now, without even meaning to, I had become the woman I used to wish I could be. The one who didn't stay silent just to keep the peace. The one who knew that peace built on lies isn't peace at all. It's a prison with fancy table settings. The offers started rolling in. Interview requests, podcast invites, even a few agents reaching out. I ignored most of them at first. It felt strange to turn my heartbreak into headlines. But then I got a message from a woman who said, "You didn't just walk away from a man, you walked toward yourself." And I needed to see that. That one stuck with me. I saved it, read it twice, and I started to think, maybe this wasn't just about what I lost. Maybe it was about what I was finally ready to build. So I opened a blank document on my laptop. No title. Just a blinking cursor and a rush of thoughts. I didn't know if it'd be a post, a blog, a book. All I knew was I had more to say. Not about Ethan, but about the part of me that kept shrinking to make him look bigger. The part that mistook loyalty for silence. The part that needed to know. You can start over at the altar and still end up whole. And as I typed that first sentence, I realized I wasn't telling a story of heartbreak. I was telling the truth. Finally, without apology. Months passed, but it felt like I'd lived an entirely new life. I traveled, not to run, but to breathe. Italy, Morocco, Costa Rica. I went places I'd once saved for a honeymoon. Turns out sunsets taste sweeter when you're not waiting for someone else to witness them. I took myself to dinner. I learned how to be alone without feeling lonely. There's a quiet magic in that. Discovering that your own company can feel like freedom instead of a punishment. That joy, real joy, isn't something you borrow. It's something you grow. The podcast started as a simple idea. Just me, a microphone, and stories I wished someone had told me when I was younger. I called it The Other Vow, the one you make to yourself. I talked about betrayal, boundaries, rebuilding. It wasn't polished, and I didn't try to be perfect. That's what made it work. Women from everywhere started writing in. Some crying, some angry, some just grateful. We built a small world out of honesty. No filters, no fairy tales, just truth. Raw, messy, beautiful truth. Then came the book deal. A real one. I remember sitting across from the publisher in New York, still half expecting them to say it was a mistake. But it wasn't. They wanted to call it The Vow I Kept to Myself. And I said yes. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because I knew what it meant. That my voice, once quieted by love, now stood on its own. That the girl who once whispered "it's okay" through gritted teeth had finally stopped apologizing for taking up space. I started sleeping better, deeper. No dreams of weddings or what-ifs. Just peace. Some mornings I'd wake up, make coffee, and reread old journal entries, the ones I wrote when I still believed love meant endurance. I hardly recognized that version of me. She was so desperate to be chosen, so scared to be alone. I didn't judge her. I just knew I'd never be her again. Healing isn't a straight line. I had my nights of tears, my waves of doubt. But I always returned to myself, and that was the difference. One afternoon, I was sitting outside my favorite cafe, laptop open, messy bun, no makeup, when I saw him. Ethan, alone, disheveled in that way that looks like someone's been living on regret. He hesitated when he saw me, then walked over, like a man trying to reclaim something he barely understood. I didn't flinch. He said my name like it still belonged to him, sat down without asking. "You ruined my life," he said, voice low, bitter. I looked at him, really looked, and all I felt was pity. I took a sip of my coffee and smiled, soft but certain. "No," I said. "You ruined mine first. I just returned the favor. With truth." He didn't respond, just stared at me, maybe waiting for me to take it back. But I didn't. I wouldn't. Because I wasn't that woman anymore. I wasn't seeking his understanding. I wasn't asking for closure. I had become the closure. And the silence between us, it wasn't tension. It was the sound of a chapter closing, finally, cleanly, and completely. He left without another word. I watched him walk away, slower than before, like even his footsteps didn't know where to go anymore. And I didn't follow, didn't text, didn't wonder. I finished my coffee, closed my laptop, and let the breeze hit my face. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't carrying anything heavy. Not his weight, not his lies, not the pressure to be the woman he expected. I was just me, stripped down, built back up, and finally standing on something real. Later that night, I recorded a new episode. I talked about the illusion of happy endings, how sometimes the most beautiful thing you can do is walk away. I didn't say his name. I didn't need to. The story wasn't about him anymore. It was about the woman who found her voice with a single word. No. The word that cracked everything open. The word that led me back to myself. We talk so much about saying I do, but no one tells you how sacred it is to say I don't, or, more importantly, I won't. I ended the recording with the line I'd been saving, the line that carried me from that altar to this moment. I didn't say I do, but I finally said yes to myself. Then I sat there, alone in my living room, bathed in the soft hum of quiet, and smiled. Not because I won, not because I hurt him, but because I had finally chosen me. And that was the real beginning, not the wedding that never was, but the life that had only just begun.
For 15 years, they walked past me without a glance, the executives who never suspected that the man polishing their floors owned most of their company. Revenge, like fine wine, is best served after perfect aging. Every morning for 15 years, I cleaned the CEO's office before dawn. I knew exactly how Alexander Sterling liked his space, desk organized at perfect right angles, bright sunlight streaming through immaculate windows, not a speck of dust anywhere. The man was obsessed with appearances, with power, with showing the world just how successful he was. He never knew that I owned 60% of this company. My name is Michael Chin, though everyone at Sterling Enterprises knew me only as Mike the janitor, the quiet guy in the navy blue uniform who emptied their trash, polished their floors, and remained invisible despite being right in front of him. I started working here in 2008, right after the financial crisis hit. Not as a janitor, back then. I was a major stockholder and board member of Sterling Enterprises. Alexander and I had built the company together from nothing. Two ambitious kids fresh out of business school with big dreams and complementary skills. I had the technical knowledge and strategic vision. He had the charisma and sales expertise. But Alexander had something else too. A ruthless streak that I discovered too late. When the markets crashed and our stock plummeted, Alexander saw an opportunity. He conspired with other board members to dilute my shares, claiming it was necessary to save the company. They called an emergency meeting when I was overseas visiting my dying mother, knowing I couldn't make it back in time. By the time I returned, I had allegedly been voted out. Alexander spun a story about my emotional instability and erratic decision-making during a crisis. He even had documents showing I had signed away my voting rights, documents I knew were forged, but couldn't prove it at the time. I lost everything, my position, my reputation, my friends in the industry, all gone. Alexander's smear campaign was thorough. No other company would touch me. My savings dwindled as I fought legal battles I couldn't win against Sterling Enterprises' army of lawyers. That's when I decided to play the long game. I sold my remaining shares, a mere 5% of the company, and used the money to create an intricate web of shell companies. Then, working through various proxies and investment vehicles, I began quietly buying up Sterling Enterprises stock whenever it dipped. Alexander's aggressive expansion plans meant the company frequently needed capital, creating opportunities for my carefully hidden entities to increase their holdings. But I needed to be close, to watch and wait and understand every aspect of the company's operations. So I did something Alexander would never expect. I took a job as the building's janitor. He didn't recognize me. How could he? The ambitious young tech entrepreneur he had betrayed looked nothing like the middle-aged janitor in a worn uniform. I had gained weight, grown a mustache, learned to slouch and shuffle and make myself forgettable. When Alexander's eyes slid past me in hallways, I knew my disguise was perfect. For 15 years, I watched Sterling Enterprises grow. I listened to conversations executives had when they thought no one important was around. I read confidential documents left in trash bins, noting which projects succeeded and which failed. I learned about Alexander's management style, his weaknesses, his tendency to overextend the company's resources. I knew more about Sterling Enterprises than anyone, except Alexander. I understood how things worked from the ground up. I knew which maintenance crews were underpaid and frustrated. I knew which middle managers were passed over for promotions despite their talent. I knew where every crack in Alexander's gleaming corporate facade was hidden. More importantly, I knew about the merger before anyone else. One night, while cleaning the boardroom after a late meeting, I found a crumpled note under the table, a preliminary term sheet from Global Tech Industries outlining a potential billion-dollar acquisition of Sterling Enterprises. I smiled, knowing my time was finally coming. Alexander had been so focused on maintaining his image as a brilliant CEO that he had overleveraged the company. The only way forward was this merger. But he didn't realize that Global Tech's offer wasn't a generous lifeline. It was a carefully baited trap. Because what no one at Sterling Enterprises knew was that I also owned significant shares in Global Tech Industries, carefully hidden behind the same web of shell companies. I had spent years quietly influencing their leadership, positioning them to make this exact move. I continued my routine, watching Alexander strut around the office with increasing smugness as merger talks progressed. He loved holding court in the break room, bragging about how he had built Sterling Enterprises from nothing, how his brilliant leadership had attracted Global Tech's attention. "This merger will cement my legacy," he announced one morning to a group of fawning executives. "Sterling Enterprises will become a global powerhouse." I was mopping the floor nearby, invisible as always. If they had looked closely, they might have noticed my slight smile. Alexander had no idea that his legacy was about to crumble. The merger announcement went public on a Tuesday. Sterling Enterprises stock soared as analysts praised the deal's potential. Alexander was everywhere: TV interviews, newspaper profiles, industry panels. The story of his success was irresistible. The visionary CEO who had guided his company through the 2008 crisis and built it into an acquisition target worth billions. All that remained was the final shareholder vote and signatures. Alexander was confident it was just a formality. After all, he believed he controlled the majority of voting shares through various allies and arrangements. That's when my carefully hidden web of companies began to emerge. It started small, one of my shell companies voting against the merger terms, then another, and another. Alexander's team scrambled to identify these mysterious shareholders, but my lawyers had constructed an impenetrable maze of corporate entities spanning multiple countries. I watched Alexander's growing frustration from my janitorial closet. His perfectly organized office became chaotic as he held emergency meetings with his legal team. Papers were strewn everywhere, coffee cups left unwashed, window blinds askew. He stopped noticing whether his trash was empty or his floors were cleaned. One evening, while I was doing my usual cleaning rounds, I overheard him shouting into his phone in the otherwise empty office. "What do you mean you can't find out who owns these companies? I need to know who's blocking my merger." This deal has to go through. The bank loans are coming due, and without this merger. He stopped abruptly, realizing he had said too much, even though he thought he was alone. But I heard the fear in his voice. The house of cards he had built was starting to wobble. That night, as I cleaned his office one last time, I looked at the wall of awards and magazine covers celebrating Alexander Sterling's business genius. Tomorrow everything would change. Tomorrow the invisible janitor would remind him of the partner he had betrayed 15 years ago. I adjusted his desk back to its perfect right angles, polished his windows until they gleamed, and emptied his trash one final time. In a few hours, Alexander Sterling would learn that appearances can be deceiving, and that true power doesn't always wear a designer suit. The morning of the merger signing, I didn't show up for my usual cleaning duties. Instead, I went to my small apartment and opened a closet I had kept locked for 15 years. Inside hung a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit, not flashy, but impeccably cut and quietly expensive. I took my time getting ready, transforming myself from Mike the janitor into Michael Chen, majority shareholder. The mustache was gone, replaced by a clean-shaven face that had aged better than Alexander might have expected. I stood straight, letting go of the careful slouch I had maintained for so long. Amazing how a change in posture could erase years of invisibility. The signing ceremony was scheduled for 10 a.m. in Sterling Enterprises' main conference room. I arrived at 9:45, not through the service entrance I had used for 15 years, but through the gleaming main lobby. The security guard, Jim, who had always been kind to the cleaning staff, did a double take, but couldn't quite place me. I took the executive elevator to the top floor, enjoying the subtle scent of the leather interior I had cleaned so many times. When I stepped out, Alexander's assistant, Lisa, was arranging water bottles in the conference room. "Excuse me, sir," she said politely, not recognizing the janitor who had emptied her trash every night. "The merger signing is a private event." I smiled. "I know, I'm a major shareholder." The conference room filled quickly. Alexander's legal team, the global tech executives, board members from both companies, all in their finest suits, all radiating confidence that this was just a formality. Alexander swept in at 9:55, his timing calculated to make an entrance. He looked surprised to see someone sitting in his usual seat at the head of the table, but covered it quickly with his practiced smile. "I don't believe we've met," he said, extending his hand. "Alexander Sterling." I stood slowly, savoring the moment. "Actually, Alex, we have." His hand froze midair. I watched the color drain from his face as recognition dawned. 15 years had passed, but in that moment, he saw the young partner he had betrayed. "Michael," he whispered. "Hello, Alex. It's been a while." The room had gone deadly quiet. Alexander's legal team was exchanging worried glances. The global tech executives looked confused. What are you doing here?" Alexander managed, trying to regain his composure. I pulled out a stack of documents. "I'm here to vote on the merger, or rather, my companies are here to vote. Phoenix Holdings, Sunrise Investments, Blue Ocean Capital. I believe you've been trying to identify these shareholders for weeks now." Alexander sank into a chair, his legs seemingly unable to hold him up. "That's impossible. You sold your shares." "I made sure." "You made sure I sold my original shares." I corrected him. "But I've been buying back into the company for 15 years. Through shell companies, through proxy investors, through every legal means available. Would you like to know how much I control now?" His lawyers were frantically flipping through documents, their faces growing paler by the minute. 60%, I announced to the room. "I own 60% of Sterling Enterprises, which means this merger doesn't happen without my approval." One of the global tech executives cleared his throat. "Mr. Sterling, what is going on here?" I turned to address the room. "Let me tell you a story about how Sterling Enterprises really began, about two partners who built something amazing until one of them saw an opportunity during the 2008 crisis." For the next 20 minutes, I laid out everything. The emergency board meeting called when I was away, the forged documents, the smear campaign. I presented evidence I had gathered over 15 years, including testimonies from former board members who had finally admitted their role in the scheme. "So, you see," I concluded, "Alexander Sterling isn't the brilliant CEO who built this company alone. He's a fraud who stole it from his partner and has been running it into the ground ever since." "That's a lie." Alexander shot to his feet. "I saved this company. I made it what it is today." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "Is that why you're so desperate for this merger? Because the company is doing so well under your leadership? Or is it because the loans you took out for your aggressive expansion are coming due and you don't have the cash to cover them?" The global tech team was muttering among themselves now. Their lead lawyer stood up. "We need to pause this proceeding. If there are questions about Mr. Sterling's authority and the company's financial status, the merger can still happen," I said calmly, "just not on Alexander's terms, and not with him as CEO." Alexander lunged across the table at me, all his carefully cultivated corporate polish evaporating in an instant. Two security guards, who I had personally watched him berate countless times, grabbed his arms. "You can't do this," he shouted. "This is my company." "No, Alex, it never was, and now everyone knows it." The next few hours were chaos. The global tech team huddled with their lawyers. Sterling Enterprises board members, seeing which way the wind was blowing, quickly distanced themselves from Alexander. His loyal executives suddenly remembered urgent appointments elsewhere. By the end of the day, Alexander Sterling had been removed as CEO by an emergency board vote. The merger was postponed pending a full investigation of the company's finances and leadership, and I had been appointed interim CEO, though not before I revealed one final detail to the shocked board. "For the past 15 years, I told them, I've worked in this building as a janitor. I've cleaned your offices, observed your operations, understood this company from the ground up. I know every strength and weakness, every loyal employee, and every self-serving manager. I know who deserves promotion and who needs to go, and I know exactly how to fix what Alexander broke." The looks on their faces were priceless. Many of them had walked past me countless times, never making eye contact, never saying hello. Now they couldn't stop staring. That evening, after everyone had left, I went back to the janitorial closet one last time. I changed into my old uniform and did my rounds, saying goodbye to the night shift workers who had been my true colleagues for 15 years. "You're really the new CEO?" Jose, my fellow janitor, asked in disbelief. "I am, and my first act will be raising wages for all maintenance and support staff. This company was built on your work, even if the executives never realized it." I ended my final shift in Alexander's former office, my office now, the same office I had cleaned every morning before dawn. I adjusted the desk to perfect right angles, not because Alexander demanded it, but because some habits die hard. A movement caught my eye. Alexander was in the hallway, escorted by security as he carried a box of personal items. He saw me in my janitor's uniform and stopped, his face a mix of fury and disbelief. 15 years, he said. "You spent 15 years cleaning toilets just to get revenge." I smiled, standing straight to my full height. "No, Alex, I spent 15 years learning every detail of the company you thought you stole from me. The cleaning was just good, honest work, something you never understood." He left without another word, his expensive shoes clicking down the hallway one last time. The next morning, I arrived wearing my suit again, but I made sure everyone knew that my door was always open to any employee, regardless of their position. Because I had learned something valuable during my years of invisibility. The real heart of a company isn't in its executive suite, but in the people who show up every day to do the work others don't see. Some of the board members suggested I hire a cleaning service for my office. I declined. Every morning, I still come in early to clean my own space. It keeps me grounded, reminds me of the lessons I learned during those 15 years of watching and waiting. Alexander Sterling now works as a mid-level manager at a small company across town. Sometimes I hear he tells people he used to be a CEO, but no one really believes him. After all, he just doesn't look the part anymore. As for me, I'm exactly where I belong, running the company I helped build, making it better than it ever was under Alexander's leadership. And every morning when I adjust my desk to perfect right angles, I smile at the truth Alexander never understood. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one you don't see at all. They say success is the best revenge, but what happens when you can build an empire from the shadows while your family still treats you like a failure? Some lessons are best taught through consequences. "Sarah, we need your room." My mother's voice was cold, calculated, devoid of any maternal warmth. I looked up from my laptop where I'd been working on financial algorithms late into the night. "What? Your sister Olivia is moving back home with her MBA from Harvard. She needs a proper workspace, and your room has the best lighting." My mother's eyes swept dismissively over my simple desk setup. "You can sleep in the basement until you find your own place." I was 23, living at home while working remotely as a financial analyst. Not my dream situation, but I was saving money and building something bigger. Not that my family knew or cared about my plans. "The basement isn't even finished," I protested, thinking of the damp concrete floors and exposed pipes. "It's not livable." "Well," my father interjected, entering my room uninvited, "maybe that will motivate you to do something meaningful with your life, like your sister." "Ah yes, Olivia, the golden child, the Harvard graduate, the one who just accepted a position as junior executive at Morgan Stanley, a job our parents' connections had conveniently secured for her. "I have a job," I said quietly, though I knew it was useless. My position as a remote analyst for a small fintech startup meant nothing to them, especially compared to Olivia's prestigious corporate title. "Playing with numbers on your laptop isn't a real job," my mother scoffed. "Your sister needs this space to prepare for her future. She's going places, Sarah. She can't work in some cramped guest room." I looked around at my room, my sanctuary since childhood. The walls were covered in mathematical formulas and coding diagrams, representations of the algorithms I'd been developing in secret. My family saw a messy display of incomprehensible scribblings. They had no idea they were looking at the foundation of what would become one of the most sophisticated financial trading systems in the world. "I'll find my own place," I said, turning back to my laptop, not because I was giving in, but because I finally had enough. 3 years of dismissal and degradation while I quietly built my empire was enough. "You have until tomorrow," my father announced. "Olivia's movers are coming at noon tomorrow." The irony almost made me laugh. They had no idea what else was happening tomorrow. Later that night, as I packed my belongings into boxes, my phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Marcus, my chief technology officer. "Tiger protocol is ready. All systems go for tomorrow's launch." I smiled, thinking about the chaos that would unfold in less than 24 hours. For 3 years, I'd been developing a revolutionary trading algorithm that could predict market movements with unprecedented accuracy. My playing with numbers had evolved into Nova Financial Technologies, a company that operated entirely in the shadows through a complex web of shell corporations. While my family bragged about Olivia's corporate job, I had built a financial technology empire worth billions. The small fintech startup I supposedly worked for, a front company. My real office occupied the top 5 floors of a downtown skyscraper, hidden behind layers of corporate anonymity. And tomorrow, Nova Financial would emerge from the shadows, launching a trading platform that would revolutionize the banking industry, the same industry where my sister had just landed her prestigious position. Another message buzzed through. "First phase complete. Nova's acquisition of Central Trust Bank is confirmed. All accounts transfer at midnight." Central Trust Bank, my parents' bank, the one where they kept their precious millions, the money they used to fund Olivia's education while telling me I needed to prove my worth before they'd invest in my future. By tomorrow morning, they'd discover who really controlled their money. I sealed the last box just as Olivia's voice echoed up the stairs. "Mom, the interior decorator needs to know my color scheme for Sarah's room." "My room." I shook my head, remembering all the times they'd made it clear whose success mattered more. When I graduated top of my class in computer science from MIT on a full scholarship I'd earned myself, they skipped the ceremony because Olivia had a sorority event. When I landed my first coding job, they dismissed it as playing with computers during the same dinner where they celebrated Olivia making a Harvard Business Review editorial board. "Sarah," my mother's sharp voice cut through my thoughts, "don't forget to leave your keys. You won't be needing them anymore." I pulled out my keychain and removed the house key, placing it on my old desk. I wouldn't need it after tomorrow. I'd never need anything from them again. As I carried my boxes to my car, I heard them in the kitchen planning Olivia's room renovation. "We'll need to redo everything," my mother was saying. "This space needs to reflect success, not whatever Sarah was doing in here." I loaded the last box and sat in my car, watching the house I'd grown up in, the house where I'd learned that family loyalty only extended to those who fit their definition of success. Opening my laptop one last time, I sent a final command to our servers: "Initialize Protocol Tiger. Authorization, Nova Alpha 1. The response was immediate: "Protocol Tiger initiated. System-wide implementation in 8 hours. I started my car, not the luxury vehicle my parents expected of a successful daughter, but another part of my carefully maintained facade. Tomorrow everything would change. Tomorrow they'd learn what real success looked like. But first, they'd learn what it felt like to be powerless. I drove to my real home, a penthouse apartment in the city's most exclusive building. The doorman nodded respectfully as I entered. Here, I wasn't Sarah the disappointment. I was Miss Matthews, the mysterious CEO of Nova Financial Technologies. In my home office, I reviewed the final stages of Protocol Tiger. The algorithm we'd launch tomorrow wouldn't just revolutionize trading, it would systematically expose and freeze suspicious financial activities across the banking sector. Activities like the creative accounting my father's company had been using to inflate its value. Activities like the hidden trust funds they'd set up for Olivia while telling me I needed to learn financial independence. My phone buzzed again. A family group text from my mother, dinner tomorrow night at Lasark to celebrate Olivia's new position. Sarah, you're welcome to join if you found a place to stay. Dress appropriately. Lasark, their favorite restaurant for family celebrations. The same restaurant where they'd announced they wouldn't help with my MIT tuition because real success means standing on your own feet. The same restaurant where tomorrow night their credit cards would be declined in front of all their society friends. I sent a brief reply, I'll be there. Opening my safe, I pulled out a thick folder labeled Project Homecoming. Inside were documents detailing every dismissive comment, every missed milestone, every instance of favoritism, matched with corresponding financial records showing how I systematically gained control of their financial institutions. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. Ms. Matthews, the board members are assembled for the final briefing. Thank you, Alice, I'll be right there. I stood in front of my mirror, transforming from Sarah the family disappointment into Sarah Matthews, CEO of Nova Financial Technologies. Tomorrow I would sit in Lasark and watch as my family's carefully constructed world crumbled, not out of revenge, but because sometimes the only way to make people see their mistakes is to show them the consequences of their actions. The basement they wanted to banish me to? After tomorrow, they'd be lucky to afford a room half that size. The next evening, I arrived at Lasark precisely on time, wearing a simple black dress that probably cost more than Olivia's monthly salary at Morgan Stanley. Through the restaurant's windows, I could see my family already seated at their usual table, champagne flowing freely as they celebrated their golden child's latest achievement. My phone buzzed with updates from Marcus, Protocol Tiger successfully deployed, all systems performing beyond expectations. Central Trust Bank's ownership transfer is complete. I smiled, tucking my phone away as I entered the restaurant. The maitre d' recognized me immediately, not as Sarah from the Matthews family, but as Ms. Matthews, owner of the building that housed Lasark. Your usual table is ready, Ms. Matthews, he said softly, then caught himself as I shook my head slightly, gesturing toward my family's table. Not tonight, Pierre, I'm joining them. I approached the table just as Olivia was detailing her new office view, 42nd floor, corner office overlooking Central Park. Sarah, my mother's voice carried a note of surprise, as if she hadn't expected me to actually show up. We already ordered. You should have been here earlier. I had some business to attend to, I replied, taking the only empty seat at the far end of the table. Naturally, business, Olivia smirked. Is that what you call moving your things to a friend's couch? My father barely glanced up from his phone, where he was probably checking his stock portfolio. Did you at least find somewhere decent to stay? We don't want you reflecting poorly on the family name. Before I could respond, Olivia launched into another story about her new position. The CEO himself showed me around. He says I have real potential to make director within 5 years. Speaking of directors, I interjected calmly. Did you hear about the changes at Central Trust Bank? My father finally looked up, his brow furrowing. Changes? What changes? Just then, a waiter approached with more champagne. My mother reached for her purse. Let's order another bottle to celebrate properly. My treat. I watched as she handed over her credit card, knowing exactly what would happen next. The waiter returned moments later, looking uncomfortable. I apologize, madam, but your card appears to be declined. That's impossible, my mother snapped. Try it again. I've tried 3 times. Madam, perhaps another card? My father pulled out his wallet. Use mine. The waiter disappeared again, only to return with the same apologetic expression. I'm very sorry, sir, this card is also declined. Olivia rolled her eyes and reached for her new Morgan Stanley corporate card. Here, let me. That won't work either, I said quietly. All eyes turned to me. What do you mean? My father demanded. I took a slow sip of water. As I was saying about Central Trust Bank, there have been some significant changes in ownership. As of midnight last night, all accounts are under new management. My mother's face paled. What are you talking about? Protocol Tiger, I said, watching comprehension slowly dawn on my father's face. He'd been in banking long enough to have heard whispers of the revolutionary trading system that was launching today. That's impossible, he whispered. Protocol Tiger is Nova Financial's new system, the one that's supposed to revolutionize banking, the one that just acquired Central Trust. I smiled. The very same. Olivia looked between us, confused. What does this have to do with our cards not working? Nova Financial's system has flagged several suspicious activities in your accounts. I explained calmly. Creative accounting, hidden trust funds, questionable transfers. Standard procedure in such cases is to freeze all associated accounts pending investigation. My father's face had turned an interesting shade of red. how do you know all this? Because, I said, finally letting my carefully maintained facade drop. I designed the system. I am Nova Financial Technologies. The silence that followed was deafening. That's ridiculous, Olivia finally sputtered. You work for some tiny startup. A cover, I replied. Nova operates through dozens of shell companies. That tiny startup is just one of many. We employ over 3,000 people across 15 countries. And as of today, we control most of your banking infrastructure. My mother's hands began to shake. But you're just what? Mom? Just the daughter you kicked out? Just the one who was playing with numbers on her laptop? Just a disappointment? I pulled out my own card, black, unmarked except for a small Nova Star logo, and handed it to the hovering waiter. The champagne is on me. In fact, everything I've ordered here for the past 5 years has been on me. I bought this building 3 years ago. The waiter nodded respectfully. Yes, Miss Matthews. Matthews? My father choked out. Sarah Matthews? You're S.E. Matthews? I nodded. The very same. Though unsurprised you never made the connection. Too busy following Olivia's corporate career path to notice what I was building, I suppose. Olivia's face had drained of all color. The merger. Morgan Stanley's new trading platform partnership is with Nova. Yes, you'll be using my technology, assuming you keep your position. Though given the irregularities Protocol Tiger has already identified in your department's trading patterns, I wouldn't count on that. My mother reached across the table, her voice desperate. Sarah, darling, surely we can discuss this. We're family. Family? I stood up slowly, looking at each of them in turn. Family doesn't kick someone out of their home to make room for the favorite child. Family doesn't dismiss achievements because they don't fit a predetermined mold of success. Family doesn't ignore graduation because someone else's sorority event is more important. I picked up my purse, genuine alligator, worth more than my father's car. Your accounts will remain frozen pending a full investigation. Given what my system has already uncovered, I'd expect calls from the SEC within the week. You can't do this, my father growled, but his voice lacked conviction. I already have. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Olivia? I hear the basement has great lighting this time of year. In case you need somewhere to stay. The walk to my car was the longest and most satisfying of my life. Behind me, I could hear my mother's sobs, my father's angry muttering, and Olivia's complete silence. My phone buzzed. Another update from Marcus. Stock market's response to Protocol Tiger is unprecedented. Nova's value has tripled since opening bell. I smiled, thinking of the room they'd so eagerly taken from me. The space they thought was wasted on my playing with numbers. That room had been where I'd written the first lines of code for what would become a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. The next few weeks brought changes no one in my family could have predicted. The SEC investigation revealed years of financial misconduct at my father's firm. Olivia's department at Morgan Stanley underwent a complete restructuring, her position eliminated in the process. My mother's social circle evaporated as quickly as their frozen assets. And me? I kept building, growing, expanding, not to prove anything to them anymore, but because I discovered something they never understood. True success isn't about corner offices or prestigious titles. It's about creating something meaningful, something that changes the world. These days, when people ask about my path to success, I tell them the truth. Sometimes being kicked out of your home is the push you need to build your own empire, and sometimes, the best revenge isn't serving it cold.